You did not find them. They found you. And the most terrifying part is not that it happened. It is that they knew exactly who you were before you said a single word, before you smiled at them, before you introduced yourself, before you gave them any information at all. They had already decided. You were already selected. And the system that selected you has nothing to do with bad luck, nothing to do with poor judgment, nothing to do with being naive or trusting or foolish. It has everything to do with what your nervous system broadcasts into every room you walk into. And until you understand what that broadcast is, and why certain people are built to receive it, you will keep calling what happened to you a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. It was a pattern. And patterns have explanations. This is the explanation. Most people think narcissists choose randomly. They picture someone scanning a crowd, picking attractive targets, pursuing whoever seems available. That is not what happens. Narcissistic target selection is not random. It is not opportunistic. It is not even fully conscious. It is a specialized perceptual system that has been refined through years of finding exactly the right person. The person who will give the most and tolerate the longest and blame themselves the hardest when things fall apart. Dr. George Simon, clinical psychologist and author of In Sheep's Clothing, identified what he called character disordered personalities. Individuals who have developed a finely tuned sensitivity to the emotional availability of others, not because they care about that availability, because they need it. Their psychological survival depends on finding someone whose empathy is high enough, whose self-worth is uncertain enough, whose tolerance for pain is long enough to sustain a dynamic that would destroy most people quickly. In plain terms, they are not looking for weakness. They are looking for specific strength that can be redirected toward their needs. And you had exactly that strength. You had empathy so developed that other people's pain registered in your body before your mind. You had patience so deep that you could hold space for someone's worst behavior while still believing in their potential. You had loyalty so strong that walking away felt like failure, even when staying was destroying you. These are not flaws. These are extraordinary human capacities. And narcissistic personalities can detect them within minutes of meeting you. Here is the neuroscience of how. Researchers studying social cognition have identified what they call behavioral leakage, the unconscious communication of internal emotional states through micro-expressions, posture, vocal tone, response latency, and eye contact patterns. Most people are not aware that they are doing this, but the information is there. Constant, readable, specific, highly empathic individuals, and the research here is consistent, show distinct behavioral signatures that emerge from the hyperactivation of their mirror neuron systems. Mirror neurons, first identified by Giacomo Rizzolatti at the University of Parma, are the neural circuits responsible for simulating other people's emotional and physical states. When you watch someone in pain, your mirror neurons fire as if you are experiencing that pain. When someone near you is anxious, your nervous system detects and begins to simulate that anxiety before your conscious mind processes it. This is not imagination. This is neurology. And in highly empathic individuals, this system is more sensitive, more reactive, and more visible in their behavioral output than in the average person. What does that look like from the outside? You pay more attention. Your eye contact is more sustained. Your responses are faster and more attuned. Your face reflects back what the other person is feeling before they finish expressing it. Your body orients toward emotional distress the way a compass orients toward north. You cannot turn this off. It is not a behavior you choose. It is a nervous system operating at a frequency that makes you extraordinarily visible to anyone who knows how to look. And narcissistic personalities know how to look. Not because they studied it, because they spent years, often beginning in childhood, learning to read emotional availability in others as a survival mechanism of their own. Here is the layer most people never reach. The narcissist's perceptual sensitivity to empathic targets did not develop in adulthood. It developed in the same place your empathy developed. In childhood, in a relational environment that was unsafe. Most narcissistic personality adaptations, and this is crucial to understand, emerged from early experiences of emotional deprivation, inconsistent caregiving, or chronic emotional exposure to a caregiver who could not or would not meet the child's emotional needs. The child who is not seen learns to make themselves visible through performance. The child whose emotional needs are dismissed learns to suppress those needs entirely and focus obsessively on the needs of others, because that is where their safety lived. The child who could never predict whether love would be present or absent developed a hyperacute radar for reading other people's emotional states, intentions, and availability. That radar, refined over years, is what the adult narcissist brings into every room they enter. Developmental psychologist Alan Shore, whose work on right brain affect regulation has been foundational in understanding early relational trauma, describes this as implicit relational knowing, the body's learned capacity to read and respond to another person's emotional state below the level of conscious thought. In plain terms, both of you developed a nervous system that was exquisitely tuned to read other people. The difference is what you did with that capacity. You directed yours outward, toward other people's pain, toward understanding, helping, holding, staying. They directed theirs inward, toward identifying who could provide what their nervous system had never learned to generate internally. Two trauma responses, developed in parallel, drawn to each other with a force that neither person can fully explain. And when they find each other, the recognition is immediate. On both sides, you felt it too. That pull, that sense of being deeply seen, that feeling that this person understood you in a way most people never had. That was not an accident. That was two hyper-attuned nervous systems recognizing each other. The difference is what that recognition meant to each of you. To you, connection. To them, resource located. Now let's talk about what happens in those first minutes. Because the selection does not happen over weeks. Research on thin slice accuracy, pioneered by psychologist Nalini Ambady, demonstrated that humans can make accurate judgments about personality traits, emotional states, and interpersonal dynamics from exposures as brief as 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Before you have spoken, before you have smiled, before you have done anything at all. The narcissistic personality is processing. How does this person respond to being approached? Do they contract or expand? Does their body welcome or guard? Do their eyes soften or stay alert? Is their smile immediate and genuine? The smile of someone who wants to be liked? Or is it measured and evaluative? The empathic person almost always expands. The body opens. The eyes warm. The smile arrives before the brain has processed whether smiling is appropriate, because your nervous system is oriented toward connection, toward welcoming, toward making the other person feel received. That orientation, which is one of the most beautiful things about how you move through the world, is exactly the signal they are waiting for. They know within seconds, this one will give, this one will stay, this one will believe my version of events, this one will work to fix what I break. And then the approach begins. Dr. Robert Hare, whose work on psychopathy and dark triad personalities has been studied for decades, identified what he called predatory gaze, the specific quality of attention that high narcissism individuals direct toward potential targets. It feels like being truly seen, because it is attention of a kind most people never receive. Intense, focused, flattering. A narcissistic personality in approach mode makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room, because they are studying you. Every response you give them is data being processed and filed. What makes you light up? What makes you deflect? What you are hungry for that you are not currently getting? Where your boundaries are soft? Where your self-doubt lives? They are not doing this maliciously in the way most people imagine. Many of them are not fully aware they are doing it. It is a pattern so deeply wired that it operates below conscious intention. But the output is the same regardless of the awareness. A profile is being built in real time, in the first conversation, and by the time you feel that spark, that sense of connection, that feeling of being finally understood, they already know more about your vulnerabilities than most people who have known you for years. This is what researchers in interpersonal psychology call the grooming phase, the period of extraordinary attention and attunement that precedes the shift into the dynamic that will eventually exhaust you. Love bombing, mirroring, future faking. These are not random manipulation tactics. They are the application of the profile that was built in those first minutes. They reflect back exactly what you needed to see. They offer exactly what you were hungry for. They become, briefly but convincingly, the person your nervous system had been searching for. And your nervous system responds the way it was built to respond, with hope, with opening, with the specific relief of finally feeling seen. And here is the most painful truth in this video. That relief was real. The feeling of being understood, real. The sense of connection, real. The hope that this was different, real. Your nervous system was not fooled by something fake. It responded genuinely to something that was genuinely present, but present only as a surface, a mirror, reflecting you back at yourself so precisely that you mistook the reflection for depth. And underneath that mirror, nothing that could sustain what you needed, nothing that could grow into what you deserved, only a system that had found what it was looking for and was already planning the next phase. Now here is where this changes, because understanding the selection process does not just explain the past. It changes the future, not by making you less empathic, not by teaching you to close off the very capacities that make you extraordinary, but by making the invisible visible. Bessel van der Kolk, in his landmark research on trauma and the body's response to interpersonal danger, describes what he calls neuroception, the nervous system's ability to detect safety and danger below the level of conscious awareness. In healthy development, neuroception functions as a reliable warning system. But in people who grew up in environments where danger wore the face of love, where the person who was supposed to protect them was also the person who harmed them, neuroception becomes recalibrated. The nervous system learns to read danger through the lens of the original environment. And in that original environment, intensity felt like love. Pursuit felt like caring. Being needed felt like mattering. So the adult nervous system does not flag those signals as danger. It flags them as home. This is not a failure of intelligence. This is a nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, recognizing the patterns it learned were safe, even when those patterns are not safe at all. And what changes when you understand this, what actually changes in the body, not just in the mind, is that you begin to build a new reference point. Not a wall, not armor, not the decision to stop trusting people. A calibration. You begin to notice the difference between being seen and being studied, between warmth and strategy, between someone who asks about your pain because they want to understand you and someone who asks about your pain because they are mapping the territory. That distinction cannot be taught intellectually. It has to be felt in the body, in the nervous system, in the place where the recognition happens before the mind catches up. And building that felt sense, that neuroceptive recalibration is the work that actually protects you. Not suspicion, not distance, not the exhausting project of never trusting again, but the gradual, embodied learning of what safety actually feels like versus what familiarity has always told you safety looks like. Because the person who selected you did not choose you because you were damaged. They chose you because you were capable, because your capacity for empathy, your depth of care, your willingness to stay and try and give, those are not vulnerabilities to be corrected. They are strengths that deserve protection. And the protection does not come from becoming someone different. It comes from understanding exactly what happened, why it happened, and who you were in the moment it did. You were someone whose nervous system was open, whose body said yes to connection before your mind could evaluate, whose empathy was so developed that it broadcast itself into every room you entered. You were exactly the person who deserved to be met with something real, and you were not. That is the injustice at the center of this. Not that you were naive, not that you missed the signs, not that you loved the wrong person, but that your capacity to love fully, openly, without withholding, was met with someone who could only use it. That is not your fault. That will never be your fault. But it is yours to understand, because understanding it completely, finally, without softening the edges, is what makes you unselectable. Not because you close, because you know. And knowing, truly knowing what was happening in those first minutes, means you can feel it now, before they finish scanning, before the profile is complete, before the approach begins. You were not chosen because something was wrong with you. You were chosen because something was extraordinary about you. Work now is not to diminish that. The work is to make sure that the next person who recognizes it is someone who can receive it, not someone who was only ever looking for a way to use it. You were never too open. You were never too much. You were never too easy to find. You were simply someone whose depth was visible from across a room. And you deserved someone who saw that depth and wanted to rise to it. Not someone who saw it and immediately began calculating how much they could take. That person exists. But they will not find you the way the last one did. They will find you differently, because you will feel the difference now, in your body. Before a single word is spoken,